So you're so much welcome and to this great forum. Like I said, let me see. Let me just do this. Great. Yeah. So today's session is about publishing your digital health research. We are going to be looking at uh, journal selection and submission strategies. Now, I understand that this forum, we have people that are starting their doctoral journey. You have probably never published, but at the end of your research, you must publish a paper. So we want to prepare you so that you can understand, so that as you're going to publish, you can make better decisions. So this session, we are going to look at, of course, deciding whether to publish. We are going to look at what does it mean when we hear about the impact factors, and then evaluating journals. And then we will look at example digital health journals. Then we'll look at a small software called Jane. In 1 hour, we shall look at it, and then I will show you how you can use it. And then we'll go through editors, what editors look for in a manuscript. And then we shall look at the 10 rules for getting published. Now, those of you that are seeing me for the very first time, my name is Wilson Tomuhimbise. I work with Mbara University of Science and Technology. I am the founder of this great platform, the African Health Informatics Research Institute. And yes, so my background, I have a PhD in computing, biased to health informatics. Yeah, and I've been involved for like the past 10 years in research projects. Now, to get started, if I know you're there, of course, you're wondering what is it to publish? And then, of course, so when we look at deciding where to publish your work, of course, I'm going to start from here so that we go together so that you can see along the way. So, of course, why do we publish? Of course, number one is to add knowledge to your field. Now, you've heard about professors, you've heard about people that are, for example, in people that have that are experts. I'll give you an example. At our university, in Bara University, we have people that have published in digital health. When you mention their names, they are actually professors from those deep domains. You've heard about fields like microbiology. You've heard about fields like digital health. You've seen about fields like wireless networks. You know, all those fields, kidney research. There are people when you mention their names, everyone, well, you may not know them, but some people know them, quite know them. Yeah, so you want to add knowledge to your field. In the field, science advances on knowledge. Yeah, because for the field to increase or for your field to advance, you must add knowledge to it. So when you go out and you carry your research, you conduct your research, we don't want it to just remain seated. Your PhD students, you're doing research now, like the examples I was giving you about people talk about telemedicine, developing dementia frameworks, people talking about, ensemble models and coming up, to microbial resistance. Of course, it is one thing to carry out your research, to go to the field or go to the lab, carry out your experiments, but it's one thing, of course, what happens when you just write your book and you put it in the library? How many people that are not within your university can actually access your book, your dissertation? Think about your research that you did at master's or that you did at bachelor's. Who has ever read that book? But you find you had record breaking, studies, but they were all because the supervisor approved, and now they are just seated somewhere. So why do we have to publish our work? Is to add knowledge to your field, and then of course to advance your career. For example, um, you've heard about people being promoted. For you to be promoted, for example, to become like a senior lecturer, or to become an associate professor, or to become a full professor, you must publish. You must publish papers. You must publish books, etc. and etc. So you need to ask yourself whether your work actually does the work add enough to the existing knowledge? Is it of interest to others in the field? So, as you're working out, how do you feel when someone, for example, says that according to Nyakaishichi, yeah, who researched about this and that, they found out that, you know, repurposing, drug repurposing, etc. So you're adding people, it means that people are getting interest in your work. For example, recently we realized that actually there was a gap as far as guiding the implementation of mobile health interventions in low resource settings. We felt like people were just coming up with interventions, but they did not have guidance on how best they can actually implement this or integrate them. So we came up with a framework, what we call the TRIMI framework. And this work was published in a journal called the Implementation Science. So you've heard about those behavioral frameworks, like well-known frameworks like, I don't know, you've heard about the Utah model, yeah, the unified theory of acceptance and use of technology. You've heard about the health belief models. You've heard about models like the consolidated framework for implementation research. Now, why you use them in your work? It is because someone realized that there was a problem with understanding a given field. They went and synthesized literature and came up with that framework. So that's why you've heard about design science research methodology by Hevner. It means that Hevner came and he wanted to come up with a process that can guide researchers on how they can frame their methodology. So we also did something like that. You can also do something like that so that people now can publish, can refer to your work, they can use your method. How do you feel when someone says, for example, I would feel happy if someone say that for us to evaluate our mobile health application, we are going to follow Wilson's Tumihimi's framework, TRIMI framework, that says people have to be trained, environment has to be restructured, and then have to be incentivized, have to be etc. and etc. What we are doing is to advance the career and also to make sure that um, people in the field, they can gain interest in our work. So you need to evaluate yourself. Have I got something worth publishing? Does the work add enough to the existing knowledge, or is it of interest to others in the field? So you need to ask, of course, where do I decide where to publish? Yeah, of course, there are so many. You've heard about people putting up conferences, so they publish conference proceedings. So you've heard about journals like the ACM, yeah, journals like the ACM or the Associate, I think it is the Association of Computing Machinery, especially for us in computing, we've heard about the IEEE. So what these guys do, they make sure that they publish, for example, so what they do, they make sure that they invite people or to submit conference papers, and then they go and present. After presenting their work, then what people have presented, they compile them into what we call conference proceedings, and then they publish them in their journal. And then there are book chapters, there are also public journal articles. Yeah, so how do I choose? Of course, you find there are so many, leave alone the 2000, but there are so many. But how do I choose, for example, the right journal for my work? For example, in digital health, there are so many journals that actually, um, there are so many journals that actually have, that are in place. But you need to ask yourself, of course, there are key things that you need to look at. You need to look at your topic. And for example, the journal. How famous is it, the journal? You can check the website. When I talk about the journal, I don't know if you guys understand, but this is when you have come up with your manuscript, the destination where that allows you to publish there. It means that you can submit your work, then they review it, and then they will accept, and then they will publish it. So you can look at the website, check at the website, then you need to ask whether it is peer reviewed. Peer reviewed. I have seen journals where you submit your paper today and you get, they accept it 2 days later. Now that means that it has not been peer reviewed. That means that it is a predatory journal that we are going to see. And then you need to ask yourself, is it a peer reviewed? What does it mean that for it to be peer reviewed? It means that your work is sent out to people, experts in the field, to evaluate it whether it is fit for publication. Yes, and then yeah, keep the question. What is the difference between a journal and an article? Thank you, Frank. So a journal is a destination where you publish an article. So a journal, for example, now this is the African Health Informatics Research Institute. We specialize in digital health. We can come up, say, people do not have, or maybe they don't, academicians, they do their work. So okay, when you go to the field and you conduct your research, yeah, and then you come up with what we call a manuscript, or reporting your findings, yeah. Now you need to submit it to a journal, yeah, so that now that journal will accept your paper to be reviewed, and then so it will give it out to people, then they will evaluate it, then they will either ask you to work on comments, and then we submit, and then they accept it. So journals, these are like, let me give like another example of like you've heard about a publisher. When we're in primary, there were like fountain publisher. Yeah. So a publisher is like it. So they have a destination, or they have like a place, or maybe where they can, for example, they allow multiple people, academicians or people that are supposed to, and then they can submit their books that they want to write, and then those books can, then the publisher, fountain publisher, reviews, edits those books, and then they will publish them. So you can either, so for you to read those books, you have to pay some money, or you read it for free. So I compare a journal. So a journal is like a bigger destination. Then an article is what we sub. Okay, um, is is um, is what is a journal can have as many articles that have been published by different, have been submitted by different reviewers. Yes, so that is what I can say. So a journal is like a destination. Yeah. Yes, from MK Publishers. So different authors can submit their work, and then the work has to go through a process so that it is of quality, and then once it is accepted, then it gets published in that journal. Yes, but we are going to see as along the way, so that we can get a better understanding. So you need to look at also the most appropriate readership of the journal. For example, you've heard about, Asian Journal of Health Sciences, African Journal of Public Health. So, so it means most likely that people that read information from that journal, either from Africa or from Asia, etc. But that does not matter. You can submit your work there, and people can actually can look at it. Then there is what we call prestige of a journal. There are journals that are prestigious. Let's use an example of universities. When you talk about Harvard, when you talk about Cambridge, when you talk about MIT, you know that those are very Manchester, Oxford, those are prestigious universities. But when you talk about some universities, they are not as prestigious as you know as Oxford or Harvard. So also when it comes to journals, we have prestigious journals like the Lancet, like the New England Journal of Medicine. Uh, those are prestigious journals, and some people boast when they publish their work in such journals. So you need to look at the prestige, how prestigious is the journal, and then the length of time from submission to publication. I can tell you that there are some journals you submit in and your paper can spend a year. Now, if you're a PhD student and you want to publish your work, and then you get a paper, and then it gets, which will determine whether you will graduate or not, that may not be suitable. And there are many factors that happen. I am an editor of a journal called the BMC Digital Health Journal. So when you submit your work in BMC, so the editor will look for me. He will assign me the papers, or I can go to the system and look for the papers available that I can handle. And then when that comes, I look for the reviewers. I will send an expert in the field, share with them the information, tell them, that we have received this and this manuscript, and then we want you to review this journal, this manuscript. Now, the reviewer has to accept to review or they decline. Sometimes they accept, but they don't return the report. And then I have to look for another reviewer. Sometimes they don't accept. Sometimes they decline. You find that a journal I submit, for example, for a paper, I can look for about maybe 20 reviewers who decline. There are many reasons why they decline. Maybe it is not their interest, maybe they don't have the time. There are some reviewers that say yes, they give you false hope. They say, we are going to review this paper, this manuscript, but then later they don't give you the report. So it is not, so you need to look at, for example, the length of time from submission to publication. But that depends. You might submit your journal and all those factors you may submit your paper and all those factors I've talked about, they can come into play. You can submit your paper, I receive it, I look for reviewers, they accept because I usually give them 10 days, 10 days or 15 days. They review, they return the papers, and then and the process becomes simpler. So it really depends. And then most importantly, of course, you need to look at the impact of the journal. For example, there is a paper now. So we are going to look at the impact factor as we are going to see what it means. So when we talk about, of course, the higher the impact factor is is the better to publish in. What do we mean by impact factors? So an impact factor, we define an impact factor as an attempt to provide a measure of how frequently papers published in a journal are cited in scientific literature. So this is calculated by the average number of times an article published in the journal in previous 2 years has been cited in all scientific literature in the current year. So if there were an average of 1,000 citations in 2017, so for example, for articles published in a journal in 2015 and 2016, then that means that the impact factor would be 10. So let me break it down. So a journal, so they consider, for example, now we are in 2016. So for us to calculate the impact factor of a journal, so we'll look at the previous 2 years, yeah, and look at how many articles that have been published in this journal in 2 years, and then look at the number of citations, how it has been cited by other researchers in those 2 years. And then when we get the average, then we can tell, that's when we get the impact factor. So, of course, yes, most journals that have impact factors, of course, have impact factors that are below 2. And then, of course, um, if of course that means that they are trying, yeah, yeah, but that's not bad. Don't say that. No, the higher the impact. So the journals with impact factors above 4 tend to be regarded as having a high impact factor, and those with 10, they are really very good. Yeah, but nowadays, of course, but this depends on the age of the journal. You find the journal has been in existence for 15 years. And for example, depends on the publisher. Yes. And then, so this is an example of the journals. So we have um, the New England Journal of Medicine, or the NEJM. So it has an impact factor of 70.67. Then we have the Lancet. So Lancet, so if you ever came up with research and it gets published in New England Journal of Medicine, that means that it is more likely to be cited as many or as numerous times. Then we have Lancet 59, we have BMJ, or the British Medical Journal, at 27.6, Lancet Infectious Diseases 27.5, Clinical Microbiology Reviews 17, Annal etc. We also have IEEE. So each journal, especially if it has been in existence for a while, it has an impact factor. Don't laugh at a journal that has an impact factor of 0.8. No, because there are those that don't have it. Yeah, so that shouldn't be a measure, because yeah, so but impact factor is very important. So if you want to be a prominent, of course, you have to target these journals. Now, the rejection rates in these journals are very high, very, very high. If you submit your work in Lancet, trust me, it may be rejected. Yes, but if it is good, it will be accepted. So how do we, of course, still evaluating the journals, make sure that the journal is published by an academic publisher or a professional association. It has clearly defined peer review process. The journal editors are experts in the field. Look out for the editors of the journal and check out their profile. And then the journal should be indexed in major databases. For example, the directory of, for example, it is indexed in PubMed, uh, Science Direct, etc. and etc. Be aware of predatory journals, because these are usually, they call them, some of them are open access, but some of them they really do not provide adequate peer review. Like I've told you, you can. I have seen papers you submit it 2 days, and then after like 3 days they have given you they have accepted it already. So you need to make sure, before you submit an article, you have to make sure that you verify. So there is this criteria called the think, check, and submit. So you need to make sure, and thinking, make sure you ask yourself, are you submitting your research to a trusted journal or publisher, or is it the right journal uh, or destination for your work? Then you need to check. You can use a checklist to assess the journal or the publisher, and then of course submit. If you answer all these questions, you can go ahead and submit. Yes. Um, okay. Thank you so. Thank you so much, Dr. Agri, for that very elaborate explanation. Thank you so much. Yes. And then we have just a minute. Yeah. So there is, of course, you need to come up with what we call a journal checklist that looks at the scope of the journal and looking, for example, what kind of papers do they publish? Because it's like it's like going to an interview and they want, for example, a master's, and for you, no, you apply for a job, they want a master's, but for you have a bachelor's. It means that you did not read the scope of the job. Yeah, so even the same thing when we are selecting the journal, um, you need to look at the scope of the journal, you need to look at the methodology, you need to look at the databases where this journal is indexed in. Check out for the impact factor. You can also check out for the open access. Open access means that the paper is published. When the paper gets accepted, it can be made available for in full so that people can download it and they can read it. But then we have those subscription where you publish a paper, but then the publisher will just for you to access that paper you have to pay a certain amount of money. So if it is possible, you can avoid that because it means that very few people want to read your paper, but they cannot access it because it is not open access. And then you need to look at the speed of publication, and then of course selectivity, as you're going to see some of this. So you can check, like we said, check for the journal website, verify that it fits your scope. You can look at about 3 or 4 issues or papers that have been published there. You can use a matcher to identify possible journals. And then, of course, you can check out for databases. And then, of course, you can email the editor to gauge if your paper is of interest, and you can ask your librarian, yeah, to you can ask them or your supervisor whether they feel that it is good for your work. So we have just some well-known publishers that when you hear that they have published their work, you don't have to question. We have the Elsevier, we have the IEEE, we have Springer, we have SEM, we have Sage, we have Taylor and Francis, we have Wiley, we have the BMJ, we have PLOS, we have Oxford University Press, we have Cambridge University Press, and we have AJO, which is the African Journals Online. So there are very many publishers that are on the way, but you can always, so these are well-known publishers. So we have come up with a list, of course, of digital health journals. We have 39 journals that we feel that can guide you. So if you're looking out for a journal, sorry, if you're looking out for a paper, a journal to publish in, you can check. So this is a list we have. You can check out these lists we have. They are arranged in no particular order. Some of them include Sage Digital Health, PLOS Digital Health, Lancet Digital Health. If you have a very, especially findings from clinical trials in digital health, you can submit your work. NPG, NPJ Digital Medicine, this is also by nature. You can also publish your work. Internet Interventions, JMIR, BMC Digital Health. I am, like I said, I'm an editorial board member of this. There is Digital Medicine, etc. I've made a list for them. You can check this link here. And then, like we said, it is important to avoid the predatory journals. So these are entities that prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship, and they are characterized by false or misleading information. deviation from best editorial and publication practices, and a lack of transparency. Yeah. Now, you see, one thing I want you to know is that for you, you may want to just finish because you feel like you want to come, you have your work and then publish. Finish, you get your degree. But you see, that paper may be used less next time when you're looking for promotion. And those books, those papers are vetted. They are sent to external reviewers. When they see that your paper is not worth it, they will reject. Yeah. So you have to make sure that you avoid predatory journals because they are. So here, they disguise as a journal that is a ship, yet they are wolves. For them, they want you pay money. You can pay small amounts of money, and then they publish your work. They don't labor to review. But when you look at these well-known publishers like Lancet, Elsevier, Springer, your work has to be reviewed by peer reviewers that are expertise. I handle, like I told you, as part of as an editor, when I look for example, if not everyone can review your paper. Yes. So we have a system at the back end of the system. It suggests the reviewers that we are supposed to um, share work with. But in editors still go further, go ahead to look at their publication history. Do they have the papers in line with your work? Yeah. Do they have the expertise? How many citations do have they? So they are so intentional. But for predatory journals, all they want you pay them money because they are money making. So they make money at the expense. Of course, they do things at the expense of quality. Yes. And then you also can come up with a journal and you begin publishing for people. Yeah, but that's not bad. But you have to make sure that you fit within the right criteria. So what are the driving forces? Of course, for people publishing in these predatory journals, there is what we call publish or perish. So in academia, career progression depends on the number of research papers they publish. Yeah, so if you want to be promoted, if you want to finish your work, you have to publish. So people may end up finding any journal and submit their work there. And then we have technology because it is easy to set up a website, spam 1,000 potential authors by sending, and also receive electronic payments. And then, of course, inexperience working without access to expertise that distinguish bogus journals. And then there is what we call pay to publish model that has been misused, whereby people say for your work to be open access, you must pay a certain amount of money. And then you find, of course, for example, several factors that I've told you. Find like a journal has taken like a year. You submit your work, you want to graduate, and these guys are not, they are not laboring to give you feedback. Like there is a paper that I submitted in BMC, Health Sciences. I think that was like last year in October. It is still there. I've not yet received any feedback. Yeah, yeah, but it is not. Yeah, so someone says, but this paper has taken long. Yeah, and they try to get for shortcuts. Shortcut skill, very important. So how do you validate, how do you cross-check or verify for, so there is what we call directory of open access journals. Now, this is a directory, for example, of all, at least every credible journal must be registered with directory of open access journals. So when you go to DOAJ, let me just share my screen, and then so that I can. So when you go, for example, to DOAJ, let me see if I can. Okay. So if I put, for example, DOAJ, Director of Open Access Journals. So this is an extensive. So this one it verifies to make sure that it helps you to find open access journals and articles. But mostly, so in this case, you'll find it registers over 23,000 journals, and then it also specifies journals without fees, the countries represented, the languages, and articles. So, for example, when you type a journal and you don't find it in DOAJ, yeah, then that means most likely that journal is new or it is fake. So I'm going to type, for example, a journal like the Lancet, or let's say BMC Digital Health. So if I just come and click search, and then so here they will just show you, they will just return. So here they will show you that there are this, let me see, where is this? So they will return. So this is a journal. They say this is the BMC that we're looking at. This is published by BMC United Kingdom. It accepts manuscripts in English. These are the subjects and computer applications in medicine. They also show you the article processing charges that each paper for open access. This is the amount, but it also gives waivers for publishers in or for authors in low income countries. Yeah. So for example, if you put if we put like the word big digital health, and then with search, they will bring you several journals that are published that are in line with digital health. Yeah, they bring you BMJ Digital Health and AI, NPJ. Of course, some of these are not in line with digital health, but they try to make sure that they bring. Let me just try to put what so that they bring digital health and see. An error was returned. Okay. Okay, yeah. So DOAJ. So make sure before you publish your work in any journal, make sure that you search out for DOA. You bring your journal and then in DOAJ, and then you can put. Sorry, you check your journal in DOAJ, and then you can also look for articles, and then you can add some filters, let's say title, and then you search for articles. They give you articles that have been published. Here they show you this article. Then you can so they show you that they are about 574 pages of the articles, and then you can check out the articles that have been indexed, 5,731 articles. So this is a directory of open access journals. Yes, and then so that is so if you don't find your journal in DOAJ, most likely it is it is predatory. And then there is what we call the Bell's list. So Bell, this was a scientist that whose job was to identify predatory journals. So he came up with Bell's list that identifies potential predatory scholarly open access publishers. Yes, but of course, this guy many people took him to court because, yes, yeah, so, but there is this list. So if you find a journal published under on Bell's list, you need to be careful. You need to think twice before publishing your work in there. And then you can use manuscript matchers that can help you, for example, to identify the journals. There is what we call, most importantly, what I wanted to tell you is about called JEN. JEN, which is the Journal Author Name Estimator. This is one of those good sites that are very important for you to identify a journal, especially in biomedical research. So if your research is not in biomedical or digital health or medicine, if it is in typical business, you may not find it in JEN. So JEN stands for Journal Author and Name Estimator. So in this case, you just search your word. So when you come to JEN, so JEN is just let me come here. Yeah. So this is so JEN. which is journal estimator. Yes, so here it helps you, so you can simply enter. Let's say you have a topic. I want a volunteer to tell us the kind of work they are working on. Let's say anyone who wants to speak out let's say their article they are working on, or maybe their study title, and then we look out for potential journals. Please unmute and you tell us. Yes, Constance. Constance, you want to go? Okay. Let's say maybe there is some, let's say I want to work out on a review about, let's say, stigma among adolescent TB patients co-infected with HIV. So this is, for example, my paper, my title, and I want to look for a paper. I want to look for a journal that is suitable. So what you do, you just come and type it here. So you can find the journals, you can find the authors, you can find the relevant articles. But now I want the journal, so you come and click, you type the word find. Now it brings you, this is the list of articles, the journals that most probably your work fits. So here they are bringing Journal of Acquired Immune Disease, etc. So depending on what you see, you can either choose to publish your work there. Yeah, and then you can also check out for let's check out for authors that have published their work in this area. They show you an author, then let's say you want to see the articles, sample articles that have been published. So you see this one, there is this article, the medication experience of TB, HIV co-infected patients, a qualitative study, and then so you can go and check it out and you read it, etc. and etc. So this is Jen, which is journal, journal name, journal author, and name estimator. You can check it out, and then you can see how PowerPoint. Yeah, you can check it out, and then you can see what it actually brings, so that you don't get stuck. Yes, and since some of us are in digital health, you can put your title here and then you see the journals that they return. So this is an example. This is the results. So depending on so these are some of I put an article about, integrating digital health in medical education training. And these were sample journals that they brought for me, that they suggested for me. I can choose them and then submit my work there. Yes, we also have publisher-based manuscript matchers. You can go to Elsevier as a publisher. You can go to Sage Journal Recommender. And they give you, they can suggest relevant articles, journals that you can publish your work in. And then, so I've already talked about open access, whereby your work can be published and can be read by everyone. It can reach a wider audience without worrying. But of course, this is at a cost. Yes, open access, most of the journals, for them to publish your work at open access, you must pay a lot of money. Like when we put in DOAJ and it's about BMC Digital, that was around $1,700. That's a lot of money that you may not have, but don't worry. Most of these journals have waivers for authors from low and middle income countries like Uganda. Now, in Uganda, it is free. Some of the journals you find that it is free. So you always think about open access. Yes, and then of course, how does a trusted journal look like? Of course, you can check. Make sure that it is published by professional association, like I've already told you. It has a clear peer review process. It has expert editors. It is indexed in major databases like Medline, Chinal, and then the articles have DOI. DOI is, I think it is document object identifier, I think digital object identifier. Yes, and this is commonly, this uniquely identifies a paper online. Yes. And then, so as we conclude, what do editors look up for in a manuscript? Please, if you have any question, please type it in the chat, I will answer it. So what editors look for in a manuscript? Number one, they are looking out for quality. So they are looking for good science. They are looking for well-planned and well-executed studies. And then they are looking at good presentation. How do you tell your story that can interest someone to actually accept your work? And then they are looking for significance and originality. Is your work significant? Is it original? Does it contribute to the body of knowledge? And your work must be consistent with the scope of the journal. And then, of course, it should demonstrate broad interest to the readership. And then also, will it be cited? If your work, for example, we submitted one of our papers that we published in Implementation Science. That was 2024. I think I saw it was published, cited by 36 people. That's not bad, but that's not good. There are papers that have over 100 citations in just 1 year. Yeah, but you need to, so they always ask yourself, editors, if they publish their paper, your paper, will it be cited? Will it contribute to the impact factor of the journal? Yeah, does it have a well-written story? And then are authors enthusiastic about their work? So writing the paper key points, make sure that you look at the strong introduction that engages the reader, that sets the scene, that explains why the work is important, and also stating the aim of the study, and then make sure that it is clearly and also logically organized with complete methods by providing enough information that allows assessment of the results. Remember, the goal of research is replication. Like those of us that studied biology, is it biology or chemistry? We looked at what we call turning, let's say, turning a litmus paper. If you carry out an experiment and it turns a litmus paper blue or red, it is either alkaline or acidic. Now that means that if you get something like green, yeah, red, it is acidic, then whatever is, so if you get something like green, it means that probably your mixture is wrong. So the goal of research is replication, to make sure that if someone follows through your method, carries out the same experiments, can they get the same or almost similar results? And then when you're reporting your results, make sure that you're clear and concise and avoid repetition between text tables and also figures. And then the relevant discussion, of course, make sure that discuss the significance and also implement the implications of the results. Our time is fast spent, but I pray that you give me more 15 minutes so that I can finish this. So the journal publishing, so this is the publishing process. When you submit your work, upon submitting your paper, we can reject it. A journal can reject your paper because probably it does not fit in the scope of the journal. And then when it is, if it keeps being rejected, it can continue to be peer reviewed. Yeah. So we send out your paper to peer reviewers or referees. We could here call it referees, but they are reviewers. Now these reviewers, they can reject upon the comments that we have got from the reviewers. We can decide to reject the paper or we can accept it. If we don't reject, you can get comments and you revise the paper, or upon revision, we can further reject it, and then you can revise. If you revise it appropriately, we can accept it, or we can ask you for more revision. If you don't become serious also, we can reject it. So the bottom line is that rejection is at every stage. Just because it has been accepted or it has gone under review does not mean that it will not be rejected. Yeah. So now, when your paper gets accepted here, then it means that it cannot be accepted and then later it is rejected. Yeah, it can happen, especially if, for example, you've heard about retractions. Yeah, but the retractions happen when the paper has been published, but probably it has a fundamental flaw. So your paper can be rejected. Yeah, so that is the process. So as you're thinking about submitting, like we've already said, make sure that you read the scope of the article, of the journal. What attracts the editor or the reader? Make sure that, of course, remember that your paper is competing with many others for the attention of the editor and the readers. Yeah, there are many papers that editors receive, so you have to make sure that you give them the best attention. Yeah, attract them, attract the editor, attract the reader to read or cite your work. Make sure that your title is brief, is interesting, and it is accurate. You've seen about titles like, say, um, um, especially those qualitative studies, they say it was like a parent to me. And then you see, like, full stop, they talk about the title. So they are trying to attract the attention of the reader. And then also make sure that your abstract attracts the reader to read your paper, because from the abstract, the readers can either decide to continue reading your work or they can reject. And then also make sure that you include the important keywords and aim for the four sections of why this study, how was it done, what was achieved. So why is the background or introduction, how this is the method, what these are the findings, implications, these are also the conclusion. Make it clear and easy to read. And so before you submit, of course, you can carry out internal review by asking your friends to read through and they give you an alternative perspective. Ask someone outside your field to read it for understanding. And then, of course, you can read the noticed authors or the author guidelines or the instructions. How do you phrase your paper for the target journal? Which font size? How much money? And then you can, of course, you need to write a cover letter to the editor about your paper. And then, of course, very importantly, never submit a manuscript without consent of all authors. I think in subsequently we shall look at authorship so that you understand who should be an author on your paper. Make sure that people have read and they have authorized. Submit your with consent of all the authors and to only one journal. You may be having a question: can't I submit one paper in BMC Digital Health and submit it in Lancet? No, because that will be cancelled. So that is not good practice. So you have to make sure that you submit to only one journal at a time. When they reject it or when you retract it, then you can submit it to another journal. Then after you submit, what happens in the review process? Of course, the reviewers are crucial for quality control. They play a vital role in the scientific process. So these ones, they have the knowledge of the field, they have the expertise, they have a good reputation, they have, of course, they are reliable. So in this case, of course, uh, these reviewers, how do we select the reviewers? We handpick them. Some of them we handpick reviewers for each paper. We can use the cited references based on the kind of work they have published in, or we can check out like Google Scholar or and then also based on the editorial board member recommendations to and then assign them your paper. So it is good to understand the reviews and what, of course, your paper will be reviewed and then yeah, and then by the reviewers. So in this case, good reviews provide the editor, of course, with the information on which decision can best. So depending on the reviews that I've got about your paper, I can determine whether to accept your paper or to reject it. Yeah, so these reviews must be insightful, they must be articulate and constructive because they tell the editor what is interesting about the paper, how the results are significant, what contribution the paper makes to the field, and what can be done to improve the paper, or whether the paper is publishable, is not publishable, and why. We don't just reject a paper based on what that someone says that reject it. No, they must take the reason why they feel the paper is not publishable. And then, of course, they further provide detailed comments, of course, regarding your work. For example, so a good review answers the following questions and provides suggestions for improvement. For example, by looking at whether the introduction explains why the work was done, whether the design was appropriate, whether the methods are clear, uh, whether the analysis was appropriate. You can't just bring things and you just lie to people. No, these reviewers will get you. Yes, etc. Are the conclusions supported by the data? Does the discussion make clear significance? Etc. and etc. So once you get your reviews, after getting reviews from the journal, you have to respond back, especially if they give you an opportunity to respond to the reviewer's report. So you have to read, so the editor has to write back to you, and then containing the reviews from the reviewers. So you need to read the editor's letter for the instruction. Then we are saying take a deep breath, proceed to the reports. You may be afraid and you can put them aside for a few days. You can read the reports and discuss with the co-authors for guide. You're not alone. You can, if there is a comment you don't understand, you can ask the co-authors, revise the paper, and then prepare what we call a response document. So remember that even comments that seem aggressive or ignorant can be helpful. So don't just dismiss comments. Someone can give you comments, or they may miss out to read to understand. Some sections may be hidden and they don't see it. So don't dismiss them. So you need always view this as a chance to improve the paper. So when you get an opportunity to submit in your comments or to respond to the reviewer's comments, look at it as an opportunity to improve the paper. So what consists good response to referees reports? Make sure that you are well organized, make sure that each comment is you have responded to each comment. And how do you start? Make sure that you appreciate them. For example, when let's say there is a comment from the reviewer, you can say, we want to thank the reviewer so much for this comment. This is how we address this and ABCD. So your report, your response to the reviewer's comments must be well organized, and then of course they should be informative. They should provide full explanation. Do not overlook or ignore any points, and always be polite. Don't be rude. Someone may ask you something, but don't make sure that you are assertive and very polite. So this is an example of a comment from the reviewer. So he's saying that the abstract is too long and too little about the rationale. Some repetition and some jargons has been presented without explanation. So, but how do you respond as a reviewer? So you can say the rationale behind the study has been established at the beginning of the abstract, line 29 to 32. The abstract has been shortened to 100 words and all jargon except age 0 has been removed. We don't agree that this term will confuse the readers. So, well, I wouldn't agree. I wouldn't suggest that you add some of these, but some people can add them so that it is respectful. I have, as I handle the reviews, I've seen people that are negative to the reviewers' comments. They respond, they're negative. That's bias. Yeah. And sometimes we can decide, because the reviewers, you have to respond to the reviewers' comments. So those were good responses, but here is a bad example. The reviewer, so this is a comment saying the presentation is not particularly clear nor concise. I feel the paper would benefit from being shortened. Here, the author is saying, as it is clearly apparent that you have not properly read or understood the paper, comments on the clarity are irrelevant. The paper has been shorted. So you see, this was a tired what? It was a very tired researcher. Yeah. So please, this is not good because as an editor, of course, I will not accept these are disrespectful. And then here another comment is 2 3-page reports with many fixable but major criticisms. The author says I have changed the MS in line with the referee's comment. This is very vague. It does not specify what has actually been changed. So you need to be very cautious as you're reviewing these comments. So after reviewing the comments, what happens next? We call it the decision. Now, usually the decision can always be either to accept. So we have 3 decisions. We have accept, we have review, and reject. So your paper can be accepted, your paper can be you can be asked to revise, and then it is re-reviewed, and then it can be rejected. This rejection can be outright or it can come at any time. Yeah, so these are the questions that are going through the editor's mind. How good is the science in this paper? Is it an important area of study that is being addressed? Is this experimental design appropriate and adequate? Has the study been put into context? Does the paper contribute significantly to the literature? Will it be read and cited? So these are the comments. These are the questions. So remember that the editor will make a final decision based on how well the reviewer's reports have been dealt with. So when you receive the reviewer's comment, how well you deal with them, that will determine whether the decision will be made or it will not be made. So you need to revise with care. You need to respond fully to each of the reviewer's comments. You need to make sure that you present cogent and complete arguments if you have not followed a reviewer's recommendation. And very importantly, make the editor's job as easy as possible. So in summary, writing, of course, for successful publication means that you have a well-designed original study to write about. Make sure that you select an appropriate journal. Know what you want to write about. Write clearly with clarity. Make the story interesting. Highlight the significance of the results, and then respond carefully and positively to the reviewer's reports. So we have these 10 rules that you need to know for getting your work published. Read many papers and learn from both the good and bad ones. Very importantly, the problem is that copying is bad, but it is not entirely bad. Download my paper that has been accepted. If, for example, you want to write a scoping review, look at an example scoping review that has been published, like in a journal like in Lancet. See how they wrote their work and do the same. Yeah. So read many papers, learn from them. But the problem is that students are lazy. They don't want to read. They just want things done. Be intentional about reading. The more objective you can be about your work, the better work will ultimately become. Be objective about your work. Good editors and reviewers will be objective about your work also. So make sure that, if you do not write well in English language, make sure that you try to understand the language. There are available English editing tools. Grammarly is there. Utilize Grammarly to edit your language. And then, of course, very importantly, number 5. Number 5 is very important. Learn to live with rejection. Let me tell you, I have submitted publications and they have been rejected. But I've also had papers that have been accepted. So you need to make sure that rejection is not good, is not final. Just because someone has rejected. It's like in life, if someone rejects you, will you kill yourself? Yeah. So probably someone does not, yeah. So you need to take it in a good faith. Rejection, you can look out for another paper, another journal, and submit your work there. Let me give you an example. One of our papers that have been mostly published, cited, was when we were submitting it in 2018. There was a journal where we submitted our work. We submitted it there. And then after a few months, the editor wrote to us and he said, these were his words were like, I have decided to reject this paper. Those were his words. 2018, on a project we were working on with my mentor. We refined that and we submitted it to the Journal of Medical Internet Research. And that work has been cited it was improved and we submitted it to another journal. So maybe someone does not understand your work, but another one will understand. It's like love. Yeah, if someone takes you for granted, another one will do it, but you need to learn your lessons. Yes, they may hate you because you're dirty. So don't take your dirtiness to another relationship. Please improve. Yeah, so learn with rejection. And then understand what makes good science and what makes good science writing, and be objective about them. Start writing the paper the day you have the idea of what questions pursue, and then you can become a reviewer early in your career. One thing that has helped me in my work, it's because I've been a reviewer for very many journals. When we published our first paper, I started receiving invitations to review and I accepted, and that helped me to understand what authors want and what they don't want. Yeah, decide early on where to try to publish your paper, and then of course, quality, not quantity, is everything. Make sure that your work is good. Don't just mind about the many pages, but just think about quality. So that marks the end. So all these resources have been generous works from these people about choosing the right journals. Johan Jang, lecture notes from Carol Watwood about choosing a journal to publish and avoiding predatory journals, and then lecture notes from the University of York about research methods and getting your work published. And that marks the end of our session today. Is there any question? Please, you can ask if you have any question. Yes, you can unmute and tell us. Frank, is that a question or it is a hand clap for me? Okay. All right. Is there any question at this moment? Irene, do you have any question? It was a hand clap. Thank you, Frank. Anyone with a question? Or is there anyone that has learned something? Or, some of these things you can be there teaching and teaching and teaching, and then no one is learning. So is there anyone that has Mary Adeke, do you have anything that you learned today?
Yes, Dr. Wilson, thank you so much for your input. And I would love to say, yes, a lot has come to light. And we see some of us are seeing the kind of mistakes we've been making. But of course, sometimes we are driven by maybe pressure to complete, pressure to, fulfill certain requirements. But I think in the ideal setting, in the ideal world of research, we can always take our time and get those good journals and say, you have, 8 months or a year to spare. You put your work there, wait for your 8 months, it comes out, so that every year maybe you're pushing out one, that is okay. But otherwise, this is very, very informative. I wish my other PhD students, combatants, had joined in, because I see we are just a handful. But thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aaron, really for all for that. Yeah, and true. I know there are very many factors. Sometimes people feel like, I think let me just, yeah, but I think I agree. I believe, of course, these things we also keep learning them. Yeah, we keep learning them, we keep improving, and then yeah, because you guys, all of you doctoral students, you're going to be supervisors, really. You're going to be professors. So it is very important for you to have some of these things. Yes, great. Thank you so much for the wonderful points that you shared. Thank you. Thank you. Constance says he learned a lot about Jane. Yes, Jane is a very interesting. Yeah, so I think that marks the end of our session. Thank you
Doctor,
so much once again. Now, if you're a doctoral student and you want to present your work, please check out you can fill the form. Yes, Frank, please ask your question. Please go
yes,
ahead and unmute. Yes, please.
my microphone is unmute. I don't know whether I can get my voice. Yes, thank you very
Yes,
much. Yes, thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Aaron. My question is really interesting, but I hope to get an answer. Do I need to first have a PhD to publish a paper? Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Frank. No, you don't need a PhD to publish a paper. You just need to be a researcher. At Makerere University, specifically in this, I think this was in the College of Health Sciences, there was a young boy called Leonard Olum. So Olum was a medical doctor. But during COVID-19, so at Gulu University, there was a good mentor called Felix Bongomin. So during COVID-19, these guys, I think, let me just stop the recording. Yeah.